Hello, my name is Sensei Alex Kakuyo, and I'm a teacher in the Bright Dawn Center of Oneness Buddhism. I'm also the author of the Buddhist blog, The Same Old Zen. Today I'll be talking about a saying that you hear quite often in Mahayana Buddhism, which goes, Samsara is Nirvana. Now, this saying is great because it doesn't really mean anything on its surface, so you kind of wonder, is it a deep teaching, or is the teacher just kind of blowing smoke into the air in order to confuse me? Well, I assure you it's the former and not the latter, and I'll explain that first by going over some definitions. Now, samsara is the world as it exists today. So that's the birds, the trees, our jobs, the dirty dishes, and more specifically, it's often used to refer to the suffering that exists in the world. So birth, aging, sickness, death, etc. And Nirvana has a lot of different layers to what it means, but for the purposes of this talk, I'll simply state that Nirvana is inner peace. It's the extinguishment of the greed, anger, and delusion that creates suffering within us. So we have samsara, which is our suffering in the world, and we have nirvana, which is inner peace. So suffering is inner peace. Doesn't seem to make much sense, but Buddhist teachers say it all the time. So what do we really mean when we say samsara is nirvana? Well, I'll explain this by telling a little story, and I promise it'll be quick. I was riding my bike the other day through the woods, and I'd stopped to look around, and it was a beautiful view. There were birds flying around in the air, the trees were nice and green, there was a babbling brook, something right out of a magazine, right? But as I looked more closely, I noticed that there was a dead tree that had fallen, maybe been knocked over by a storm some time ago, and it was rotting not too far away from me. And as I continued to look around, I noticed that there were actually a lot of dead trees around me. So it was this strange juxtaposition where we have this beautiful, lush green scenery, the babbling brook, the birds in the air, and we also have a ton of dead trees. And mixed in with some of these dead trees, there was a dead squirrel. So here we have a lot of suffering and a lot of beauty all in one place. And I thought about the natural cycle of life and how the trees fall down and they turn into soil, and that soil gives birth to new trees. And I realized that the death of the old trees and the life of the new trees wasn't a separate thing. It's all exist in this single force. It's only my mind that creates the separation between dead tree, live tree, suffering, happiness. In reality, it's all one thing. And when we talk about samsara being nirvana, suffering being inner peace, it's exactly the same thing. The pain that a woman experiences when she's in labor isn't separate from the joy she experiences when she holds her child. It's all part of one single birthing process. The pain that an athlete experiences when they're lifting weights or running on a treadmill isn't separate from the joy they experience when they win a ball game or a race. It's all part of a single training regimen. It's our mind that separates the two things and creates suffering and creates joy. But if we can accept that dead trees are a part of live trees because they all make up the forest, we can accept that our suffering is part of our joy because it's all part of our life experience, well, suddenly there's no delineation. Suddenly samsara is nirvana. Suffering is joy. Because it's all part of one beautiful life experience that we have as human beings. And we can accept our suffering, and in doing so, we can experience greater joy, because we're not focused on one or the other. So, next time you hear a teacher say samsara is nirvana, you know exactly what they mean. It's just a fancy way of saying acceptance. So that's the talk for today. I hope it was helpful. If you enjoyed today's talk and you'd like to be made aware of other talks in the future and you're watching on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe. And if you're watching on Facebook or Twitter, please share or retweet. That way we can all continue learning together. And finally, if you'd like to read some articles I've written on Buddhist practice, you can do that at my blog, The Same Old Zen, which can be found at sameoldzen.blogspot.com. So, that's all for today. Amitabha. Until next time.